Hello everyone, welcome to Diplomatic Brief. After Brexit, the UK lost people and money, wasting years. The previous Conservative government followed the US closely, acting as vanguard in anti-China actions. Now that the Labour Party is in power, they want to play both sides between China and the US. On one hand, the UK faces US pressure to keep up confrontation with China. But in reality, they don't want to be at the front line, and they also want to strengthen economic and trade cooperation with China. Because of this, some UK policies have highlighted contradictions between these two demands, as seen on June 24. The National Security Strategy Report repeatedly mentions China. Foreign Secretary David Lammy delivered a speech in the UK Parliament during a review of China policy. On one hand, he emphasized the importance of China, saying that the UK should strengthen engagement and cooperation with China. On the other hand, he also said that China poses multiple threats to the UK in the security field, including espionage activities, attempts to undermine and disrupt the UK's economy and democracy. In addition, the UK government will invest £600 million to counter what it calls China's espionage activities. David Lammy pointed out that China's strength is an undeniable fact, and cutting ties with the world's second-largest economy is not an option. He said that China is the UK's third-largest trading partner and also the second-largest source of international students in UK universities. China will continue to play a key role in supporting the UK to achieve secure growth. At the same time, the report also states that examples of China engaging in espionage, interfering in the UK's democracy, and undermining the UK's economic security have increased in recent years. According to a report by the Associated Press, the UK government has refused to classify China as a threat on the same level as Russia. The report says that China is a geopolitical challenge, but on major issues such as tackling climate change, global health, and economic stability, China also plays an important role. The UK government will seek a kind of support for secure and resilient growth to promote trade and investment relations that benefit the UK economy. At the same time, the UK government also stated that there are clear differences between China and the UK in several key areas such as human rights and cybersecurity, and that tensions may continue. In an increasingly dangerous world, the UK's attitude toward national security has become tougher and sharper. The Chinese embassy in the UK responded by saying that the facts fully prove that China has always been a builder of world peace, a contributor to development, not a violator of the international order. China's development does not pose a challenge or threat to any country, but instead brings opportunities for common development to all countries in the world. The so-called accusations of China engaging in espionage, cyber attacks, and transnational repression against the UK are purely fabricated and malicious slander. The Chinese side urges the UK to see the situation clearly and adopt the right mindset, to abandon Cold War thinking and ideological bias, and to maintain a correct understanding of China. Only by adhering to mutual respect, openness, and cooperation, and by maintaining dialogue and exchanges between China and the UK in all fields, can the relationship between the two countries proceed smoothly and achieve long-term stability and development. At a press conference, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wei Jiakuan, when asked about related issues, further pointed out that both China and the UK are permanent members of the United Nations Security Council and major world economies. Developing bilateral relations and strengthening mutually beneficial cooperation is in the interest of both countries and the world. He reiterated that China is committed to the path of peaceful development and does not pose a threat to any country. China does not threaten or interfere in the internal affairs of other countries and is willing to develop China-UK relations on the basis of mutual respect and properly handling differences. However, China will absolutely not accept any slander, smearing, or groundless accusations. China's response has not been particularly strong, likely because it recognizes that behind the UK is actually the United States. Right now, China needs to focus more of its energy on dealing with Trump. Since the UK is not taking a one-sided stance and is merely engaging in smearing, China also mentioned the areas of China-UK cooperation, which is a very important point. In fact, the UK government's recently released report avoided putting China on the same level as Russia as a threat to the Western world. Clearly, this perspective is not entirely the same as that of the US Democratic administration or the EU. At the same time, there are also reports from the UK that there is a high chance they will approve China's resumption of construction on its super embassy in London. For China, this represents a concession from the UK in their diplomatic exchanges. After all, if you don't want to follow current affairs, it's actually quite clear that the UK has been closely following America's anti-China stance. British companies have also gone along with the actions of American anti-China politicians, right? According to the Financial Times, the Trump administration expressed so-called national security concerns over China's Mingyang Group planning to build a wind turbine factory in Scotland, and even pressured the UK government about it. At the same time, the US also issued similar warnings to the German government. Previously, Mingyang Group had secured a large order for an offshore wind power project in the North Sea of Germany thanks to its technological strength. In April last year, Mingyang Group was shortlisted as a priority candidate for Scotland's Green Project. And this project? It's the first commercial-scale floating offshore wind farm in Europe. The aim is to replace traditional gas and diesel power generation with renewable energy, providing clean electricity to the UK power grid. However, before the project could officially launch, it was already facing accusations of national security risks and claims of unfair competition from China. Some British politicians and Western media have raised doubts, with these voices calling on the UK government to strictly scrutinize investments from so-called hostile countries, essentially trying to exclude Chinese companies. The Financial Times pointed out that US intervention has put the UK in a dilemma between pursuing its emission reduction targets and responding to the tough stance of the Trump administration. The UK's Minister for Energy Security and Net Zero Emissions. When visiting China this March, he emphasized the potential for cooperation between China and the UK in the fields of energy and climate. If the government were to block Mingyang Group's investment, it could be seen as a hostile act towards China and might affect the prospects for cooperation between the two countries in the clean energy sector. There are also divisions within the government regarding this project, and an industry insider from the wind energy sector bluntly stated that the US has failed to invest enough resources in the wind power supply chain, yet now is instead trying to interfere with other countries' government choices. The industry must stand up and tell American politicians that this is none of their business. In fact, the UK currently lacks the heavy industry capacity to independently produce wind turbine towers. According to The Guardian, citing industry insiders, the UK has tried to reach out to European manufacturers, but has not been able to secure cooperation. If Chinese companies are excluded from participating in the UK's offshore wind power projects, the country will face a supply shortage dilemma. A spokesperson for the Green Whales project emphasized that the project welcomes all investments in offshore wind power to promote industry development, create jobs, and build a prosperous supply chain. At the same time, the Scottish government also stated that it welcomes international companies to participate in the offshore wind industry and believes that maintaining pragmatic economic relations with China is crucial for employment and growth. The conclusion is that in the field of new energy, China has started to lead the world in many areas. It was the West that first called for emission reductions, and now, to achieve these goals, cooperating with China has become an inevitable choice. If the Western world does not cooperate with China, China will still continue its efforts in emission reduction and will further strengthen cooperation with countries in the global south. Emission reduction is a development issue that humanity cannot avoid. Whoever achieves the targets first will be seen as representing advanced civilization and sustainable development. China firmly believes this is the future of the world. If Western countries like the UK are willing to cooperate, we can work together. Even if the West is unwilling to collaborate with China on climate issues, China will still move forward towards sustainable development together with countries in the global south. In that case, it will be the Western countries that get left behind. Additionally, regarding the 2 Chinese language videos the US recently posted on social media, encouraging Chinese citizens to engage in espionage activities for the CIA. Openly recruiting Chinese spies like this, China's Ministry of State Security has responded. On June 25, the Ministry of State Security commented that the CIA's posting of Chinese language videos on social media platforms to recruit Chinese personnel for espionage activities is utterly despicable and laughable. This move was addressed in an article published on the ministry's official WeChat public account, titled "The CIA's Public Recruitment of Chinese Spies is Yet Another Farcical Performance." The article goes on to say that recently, the CIA released a Chinese language video on social media platforms, blatantly recruiting Chinese personnel for espionage activities, filled with poor rhetoric and slanderous remarks. It ridicules the US intelligence agencies as laughable, full of contradictory logic and hysterical madness, exposing their futility. The Ministry of State Security described the CIA's move as a blunder that quickly triggered a wave of ridicule from netizens around the world. The article says that the so-called world's #1 intelligence powerhouse has, thanks to its baffling actions, once again become an international laughingstock. The article notes that after the Trump administration came to power, there were multiple plans to cut staff in federal agencies, and the CIA was no exception. Not only did it face a sudden round of buyout-style layoffs in early February, but it is also expected that more staff will be cut in the future. You could say they are beset by difficulties both inside and out, making things even worse. Faced with such heavy losses of intelligence personnel. So, in a panic, they tried to make up for it by launching a high-profile public recruitment drive, an operation that was as much about putting on a show and grabbing attention as it was about desperately trying to fix their problems. The real aim was to cover up their own failures and setbacks, and to avoid becoming the next scapegoat in a round of political reshuffling. Through this so-called public recruitment, they tried to lure traitors and insiders to betray their country, but they are absolutely no match for the sharp eyes of China's national security agencies. And they are no match for the just reckoning of Chinese law. Frankly, the CIA, as an old and established intelligence agency, once had a prominent reputation on the international intelligence battlefield. But now, they've gone against the basic principles of intelligence work, resorting to crude tactics like running ads to try and trick or incite citizens of other countries to betray their homeland for personal gain. This kind of childish stunt is not only a blatant provocation against the conscience of the international community, but honestly, it's downright pathetic and laughable. These actions further show that the so-called professional aura of the CIA has already faded, making it clear to people around the world just how hollow they really are beneath their tough exterior. The official also emphasized that, in the new era of the people's war to safeguard national security, any attempt to incite the Chinese people to betray their country is doomed to fail. And as for any schemes to carry out intelligence infiltration through dialogue, those are destined to be futile as well. The conclusion is that the rivalry between China and the US is getting more and more intense, so it's especially important to maintain a clear sense of the bigger picture and not become a pawn in America's schemes to